Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Since you're the company's director now, you'll be providing for all of us, my husband declared, and immediately quit his job. His mother and brother moved in with us to live at my expense. I didn't argue, I silently agreed. But the very next morning, when those freeloaders woke up, they were horrified by what they saw. Before we begin, share in the comments what kinds of stories you'd like to see on the channel, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy listening. Luciana stood by the window of her new office on the 9th floor, gazing out at the sprawling city below. Just yesterday, she'd been an ordinary sales department manager, but that very morning she had been summoned to the CEO's office and informed of her appointment as director of the capital branch of Alpha Textile. It had all happened so fast, her head was still spinning. Victor Mendoza unexpectedly handed in his resignation, the CEO explained, handing her a folder of documents. Said he wants to take up farming in the countryside. Can you imagine? 40 years in the textile industry, and suddenly he wants to raise cows. Luciana nodded, though the story did sound strange. Victor Mendoza was a city man through and through, a lover of theater and fine dining. A farm just didn't fit his lifestyle. But who knows what goes on in people's heads after 50? Why me? She asked, glancing over the contract. You've had the best sales results for the past 3 years. Clients respect you, so does the team. And your education is ideal. Not everyone graduates from the university's economics faculty. The salary was 2.5 times her current one. Luciana signed without hesitation. At 34, opportunities like this don't come often. On her way home, she felt elated, already imagining telling her husband the news. Carlos worked as a lawyer in a small firm, decent pay, but with little prospect for advancement. Now they'd be able to afford more, maybe even finally take that long-dreamed-of vacation to Europe. They rented a spacious 3-room apartment in a good neighborhood on the 7th floor of a new building. Luciana took the elevator up, unlocked the door, and heard her husband's voice from the kitchen. "Sunshine, you're home?" he called out. "Yes, coming to you. I've got news." Carlos was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, typing something. When he saw her, he closed it and turned to face her. "What news?" he asked, though there was none of his usual curiosity in his voice. "I was appointed branch director today. Can you believe it? The salary will be $250,000 plus bonuses." She expected joy, hugs, congratulations. But Carlos frowned slightly and stayed silent for a few seconds. "That's unexpected," he finally said. "What happened to the previous director?" "Victor Mendoza quit. Decided to go into agriculture." "Mendoza?" Carlos looked surprised. "The one who always talked about opera premieres?" "Yes. Strange, isn't it? But what does it matter? The important thing is, we've now got new opportunities." Carlos stood, came over, and hugged her, but mechanically, without warmth. "Of course, congratulations. Well done. That's a lot of responsibility. Do you think you can handle it?" The question sounded ambiguous. Luciana pulled back and looked at him. "What are you doubting?" "No, director positions are a whole other level of stress. Different demands. Maybe you should have thought it over?" "Carlos, I've already signed the contract. And why are you reacting like this? This is great news." "Yes, of course, great," he agreed quickly. "I'm just tired from work, sorry. Let's celebrate." He took a bottle of champagne from the fridge, but Luciana noticed his hands tremble slightly. Over dinner, they talked about their future plans, but her husband seemed distracted, often glancing at his phone. "Who's texting?" Luciana asked when the phone vibrated yet again. "Oh, just a colleague, asking advice on a case." But she had caught a glimpse of the sender's name, Mom. Carlos was texting his mother, which was unusual in itself. Normally, they spoke on the phone once a week on Sundays, no more. The next day at work, Luciana was absorbed in studying reports and getting acquainted with her new responsibilities. It turned out that things at the branch were not as smooth as they had seemed from the outside. Several major clients were late with payments, and one contract was on the verge of collapse due to fabric quality issues. She stayed late, poring over the documents. She got home tired, around 9 in the evening. Carlos met her at the door with a somewhat guilty look. "How's it going?" he asked, helping her take off her coat. "Challenging, but interesting. There's a lot of unresolved issues, but I'll sort them out." "Of course you will. You're amazing." Over dinner, he was more talkative than the night before, asking about her work, but Luciana sensed a certain stiffness in his manner. as if he were playing the role of a caring husband rather than simply being one. By the way, he said as they were washing the dishes, my mom called. She congratulated you on your appointment. You told her? Well, yes. She cares about how we're doing. Luciana was surprised. Carmen, Carlos's mother, had never shown much interest in her career. When they met, she usually asked only about her health and when they were planning to have children. And what did she say? She's very happy for you. Says now we'll have completely different opportunities. The phrase different opportunities stuck with Luciana. It was strange to hear her mother-in-law suddenly talking about her career in such terms. The next few days flew by in a whirlwind. Luciana threw herself into work, trying to get a handle on all the branch's problems. She managed to make arrangements with 2 of the delinquent clients. The third case had to be handed over to the legal department. The defective fabric issue was resolved too. The supplier agreed to replace the shipment. At home, she showed up only late in the evening, exhausted but satisfied. Carlos behaved with conspicuous attentiveness, cooking dinner, asking about her day, massaging her shoulders. But every now and then she caught him giving her a strange, calculating look, as if he were working something out in his head. On Friday evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Carlos suddenly said, "Hey, remember my brother Daniel?" Luciana nodded. Daniel was 5 years younger than Carlos, worked somewhere in IT without much success. He changed jobs often, complained about bad bosses and low pay. He's in a tough spot right now. Quit his last job, can't afford rent. Mom offered to let him stay with her, but you know how cramped it is in a 1-bedroom apartment. And what are you suggesting? Maybe he could stay with us for a week or 2, until he finds something suitable. Luciana thought it over. She didn't see Daniel often, but he seemed like a decent guy. And if he really was in trouble, on the couch in the living room? Yeah, he won't be any trouble, I promise. Might even help out around the house. All right, but just for a short time. Thanks, sunshine. I'll call him tonight. Carlos pulled out his phone and dialed. Danny, hey. Yeah, I talked to Luciana. You can come over tomorrow. Of course we'll help. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes. Carlos spoke quietly, but Luciana caught the phrase's great opportunity and she agreed. He'll be here tomorrow, her husband said, putting away his phone. He's really grateful. Is he looking for work? Of course. But you know, the IT market is tough right now. Maybe you could help? Surely your company needs programmers. We make textiles, Carlos. What programmers? Well, automation, databases. Every company has that nowadays. Luciana shrugged. Maybe it was worth checking. The next day, Daniel arrived with 2 large duffel bags and a backpack. He looked fine, tall, lean, in trendy jeans and a sweater. But there was an uncertainty in his eyes. Luciana, thank you so much, he said, shaking her hand. I won't be here long, I promise. Just a couple of weeks until I find a job. It's no problem. Make yourself at home. Daniel settled into the living room, neatly arranging his belongings. Over dinner, he talked about his difficulties finding work, complaining about employers. They all want experience, but no one wants to give you a chance. It's a vicious circle. What's your education? Luciana asked. Programming college. And I've taken various courses. I see. She didn't mention that serious IT companies usually require a university degree. No point in discouraging him. That evening, when they went to bed, Carlos hugged her and whispered, "Thanks for agreeing to help my brother. You're wonderful. We're family." Yes. And by the way, Mom also wants to visit. This weekend. She hasn't seen us in a while. All right. But something inside her stirred. First the brother, now the mother. Too many coincidences to be random. On Sunday, Carmen did indeed arrive. A stout woman in her 60s, with a commanding personality and a habit of controlling everything. She looked over the apartment with a critical eye, asked about the rent, and gave an approving nod. You've done well for yourselves. And with your new position, Lucy, maybe you can think about buying a place. We haven't thought about that yet. You should. Money should work and bring in income. Over lunch, her mother-in-law questioned her in detail about her new job, her salary, her prospects for advancement. She showed more interest in her daughter-in-law's career than she ever had before. Is the company big? She asked. Medium-sized. 3 branches in the country, plus the head office. And now you're in charge of the capital branch? Yes. So all decisions go through you? Many of them. That's wonderful. So many opportunities ahead. Those opportunities again. Luciana was beginning to suspect what her mother-in-law meant. After lunch, Carmen lingered in the kitchen with her sons. They spoke quietly, but Luciana caught snatches. We just need to present it the right way. She's smart, but she'll agree. The main thing is not to rush. When Carmen left and Daniel went to visit a friend, Luciana asked her husband, "What were you whispering about?" "Oh, nothing. Mom's just worried about Daniel. She wants him to find a job as soon as possible." "And how am I supposed to help?" "Well, you're the director now. Surely you can get someone in somewhere." "Carlos, I've only been in the position a week. I can't just start with nepotism." "It's not nepotism, it's helping family." There it was, the truth. Helping family. So her appointment was being seen as an opportunity to employ relatives. "I'll think about it," she said evasively. But she didn't feel like thinking about it. Her intuition told her that the business with the brother was only the beginning. On Monday, she was met at work with an unpleasant surprise. The accountant informed her that one of the largest clients was terminating their contract. The official reason was a change of supplier, but Luciana suspected otherwise. Victor Mendoza, the former director, might have lured the client to his new company. She called the client's representative and tried to get details, but he was tight-lipped. "The decision's been made, I'm sorry. Maybe we could discuss the terms? We're willing to review our prices." "No, it's final." Luciana hung up the phone with a heavy feeling. Losing that client would deal a serious blow to the branch's financial results, and as the new director, she would be judged on performance. The entire day went into trying to find a replacement. She called potential clients, studied the market, and drafted commercial proposals. She came home late and very tired. Daniel was sitting in the living room with his laptop. Carlos was cooking dinner. "How was your day?" her husband asked. "Bad. We lost a major client." "Is it serious?" "Very. 20% of our turnover." Carlos frowned but, oddly, didn't look particularly upset. "You'll find new ones." "Easy for you to say." Over dinner, Daniel suddenly brought up work. "You know, Luciana, I've been thinking. Maybe I shouldn't be looking for a job as a programmer. The market's in crisis everywhere, competition's tough. Maybe I should try something else." "Like what?" "Well, management, sales. I've got good communication skills." Luciana looked at him closely. Daniel spoke hesitantly, but there was a hopeful glint in his eyes. "You have no experience in sales. You can learn. The main thing is motivation." Carlos backed his brother up. "Why not? You said yourself there's high turnover in your company. There's turnover in the sales department because the work is tough. You have to deliver results. Daniel's a smart guy. He can handle it." Luciana stayed silent. It was becoming clear where this conversation was headed. First temporary housing, now a job. What would be next? That evening, when Daniel went out, she tried to talk seriously with her husband. "Carlos, I think your family sees my promotion as a way to solve their problems." "What do you mean?" "Daniel showed up right after I became director. Your mother suddenly took an interest in my work. Now your brother wants to work at my company. And what's wrong with that? People help each other. What's wrong is that I'm the only one who has to help. And what do I get in return?" "What do you mean, what?" "Daniel will work, bring money into the household. If he gets the job. And if he doesn't? He will. You'll help him." There it was. Direct pressure. Not a request, but a statement of fact. "And what if I can't get him hired?" Carlos looked at her in surprise, as if she had asked something absurd. "Why wouldn't you? You're the director." "Carlos, that doesn't mean I can do whatever I want. I have a boss. There are corporate procedures. There's always a way. The main thing is wanting to help family." Family again. The word was becoming some sort of password meant to override all objections. The next day at work, Luciana couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the situation at home. She was beginning to realize she'd fallen into a trap. The directorship, which had seemed like a stroke of luck, was turning into a source of problems. During her lunch break, her best friend Natalia called. "How's it going, Madam Director?" "Hard, nada. The work's tough, and on top of that, I've got problems at home." "What kind of problems?" Luciana told her about Daniel and her husband's strange behavior. "Listen," Natalia said after a pause, "I don't think this is a coincidence. Everything's lining up too neatly." "You think so?" "I'm sure of it. Your promotion is like winning the lottery for them. Now they'll want their share. But this is my job, my effort. That doesn't matter to them. They only see the opportunities." After that conversation, Luciana felt even worse. It turned out that the people she considered family saw her only as a source of benefits. That evening, the atmosphere at home was tense. Daniel was discussing something with Carlos, but they fell silent when she entered. "What were you talking about?" she asked. "Oh, just guy stuff," her husband waved it off. Over dinner, Daniel brought up work again. "Luciana, I put together my resume. Could you take a look? Maybe give me some advice?" The resume was weak, mediocre education, patchy work experience, no references. With that document, no serious company would take him. "It needs some work," she said diplomatically. "Like what exactly?" "Well, structure your work history better, add achievements. Or maybe I don't need to bother with the resume." Carlos cut in. "You could just recommend him as a reliable person." "That's not how it works." "How does it work then?" "There's a selection process, competition, interviews." "Oh, come on," Daniel waved his hand. "Everywhere has its people. The main thing is for the director to put in a word." Luciana realized they had no understanding of how a serious business operates. To them, her position was a magic wand that could solve any problem. "I'll think about it," she said, to close the topic. But there was nothing to think about. Hiring an unqualified relative would mean putting herself and the company at risk, and refusing would mean damaging her relationship with her husband. That night, she lay awake for a long time. Carlos slept beside her, and she looked at his face in the moonlight, trying to understand when he had changed, or had she simply never noticed his true nature before. In the morning, she was woken by a phone call. It was Carlos's mother. "Lucy, dear, how are you?" "I'm fine, Carmen." "And how's Daniel? Is he settling in?" "He's still looking for options." "Of course, job hunting isn't easy. But you'll help him, won't you? You have such opportunities now." There was again those opportunities. "I'll do my best. I knew I could count on you. And I was also thinking maybe I should move to the capital. It's so boring in the suburbs, and life is buzzing here. I could help you around the house." Luciana felt a chill inside. "Carmen, our apartment isn't very big." "Oh, nonsense, there's enough space. I'm not picky. The main thing is to be close to family." After the call, Luciana realized this was only the beginning. First the brother with his temporary stay, then the job placement request, and now the mother planning to move in. They were methodically embedding themselves into her life, using her new position as leverage. Work wasn't going well either. Another client decided to terminate their contract, citing a change in purchasing strategy. Luciana began to suspect that someone was deliberately poaching their clients, possibly Victor Mendoza again, in his new role. She tried to reach the former director, but his phone went unanswered. His secretary said he was on vacation and had left no temporary number. During her lunch break, Luciana decided to drive to the office of the company where Mendoza now worked. She found the address online. It turned out to be a serious textile firm, a direct competitor. Outside the building, she spotted a familiar car. It belonged to a representative of one of their former clients. A coincidence? Unlikely. Luciana understood then she had been set up. Mendoza hadn't left to become a farmer. He'd been lured away by the competition, and she had been appointed director of an already troubled branch. Now she was left to clean up the mess her predecessor had created. That evening at home, she tried to tell her husband about her suspicions, but he listened absent-mindedly. "Maybe you're exaggerating," he said. "Clients come and go. It's normal. Carlos, in 1 week we've lost half our turnover. So, you'll recover it. You're capable." His indifference shocked her. Either he didn't understand the seriousness of the situation, or he didn't want to. "And what if I don't? What if I get fired?" "You won't. And if you do, you'll find another job." "By the way," Daniel chimed in, "Mom wants to come for a week. Says she misses us." "Again?" Luciana asked in surprise. "She was just here." "Well, we're family. It's normal to keep in touch." Carlos backed his brother up. "Yes, let her come. Maybe she really should move to the capital. At her age, living alone isn't easy." "And where would she live?" Luciana asked directly. "Well, with us for now. Then we'll figure something out." "For now," meaning another temporary arrangement that could last indefinitely. "Carlos, we need to have a serious talk." "About what?" "About what's going on. First Daniel for a week, now your mother wants to move. I get the feeling my promotion is being treated as a family jackpot that everyone needs to cash in on." The brothers exchanged glances. Something in their look was both guilty and stubborn. "Luciana, you're taking it the wrong way," Carlos began. "We just want to be closer to each other. That's normal for family. Closer or living off me. What's money got to do with it?" Daniel protested. "I'm looking for work. You've been looking for 2 weeks. And the only thing you're interested in is getting into my company through favoritism. That's not favoritism, it's supporting a relative. Luciana rose from the table. You know what, I need to think. I'm going for a walk. It was a cool autumn evening. Luciana walked along the park's tree-lined path, reflecting on how quickly her life had changed. Just a month ago, she had a stable job as a manager, a predictable routine, and a normal relationship with her husband. Now everything was upside down. Her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. If you want to know the truth about your appointment, come to El Patio Cafe on the main square tomorrow at 6 p.m. Table by the window. Luciana froze in her tracks. Who could have sent that? And what truth did they mean? She reread the message several times. The pattern of events was becoming more and more mysterious. First Mendoza's sudden resignation, then her unexpected appointment. Clients leaving. Her husband's family acting strangely. When she returned home, Carlos and Daniel were in the living room, talking quietly. They fell silent when they saw her. Everything okay? Her husband asked. Yes, just got some fresh air. You're not mad at us? I'm just tired, Carlos. Tired of figuring out who's right and who's wrong. In the bedroom, she stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about the mysterious message. Her intuition told her that tomorrow she would learn something important about what was really going on. The next morning at work brought fresh trouble. The chief accountant told her that 2 more clients had decided to terminate their contracts. The reasons were the same: change of strategy, new suppliers, economic considerations. Elena Rodriguez, Luciana asked the accountant, do you know where these clients went? To Textile Profi, she replied. Victor Mendoza is the director there now. It was all becoming clear. Mendoza hadn't just changed jobs, he had been systematically poaching clients from his former branch. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? I thought you knew. Victor Mendoza had called several of our clients even before his resignation, telling them he'd soon be working somewhere else. So he prepared his move in advance? Looks that way. Luciana felt fury boiling inside her. So she had been appointed director of a branch that was already set up to fail. Mendoza had planned his departure to the competitors and taken the client base with him. She spent the entire day trying to salvage the situation, calling potential clients, drafting new commercial offers, looking for alternative suppliers. By evening, her head was pounding from the strain. At 6 o'clock, she was at El Patio Cafe. At a table by the window sat an elegant woman of about 45, dressed in a tailored suit. Luciana Garcia? The stranger asked when she approached. Yes. And you are? My name is Alba Martinez. I work in the HR department at your company's head office. Luciana sat down opposite her. The woman ordered coffee and got straight to the point. You're probably wondering why I asked to meet. The fact is, your appointment as director has, let's call them, hidden complications. What kind of complications? Victor Mendoza didn't resign of his own free will. He was asked to leave after it came to light that he'd been in talks with competitors. But he had already laid the groundwork for clients to follow him. So I was deliberately given a doomed position? Not exactly. Management hoped a new director could turn things around, but they overlooked one factor. What factor? Alba paused, as if deciding whether to continue. Mendoza has connections in your family. More precisely, in your husband's family. Luciana's breath caught. What do you mean? Carmen Mendoza, your husband's mother, worked as Victor Mendoza's secretary 15 years ago. They've stayed in touch all these years. But that's just a coincidence? Unlikely. Your appointment happened on Mendoza's recommendation. He told management he knew the perfect candidate, a young, promising employee with excellent performance. Luciana felt the world tilt around her. So he specifically recommended me? Exactly. And now ask yourself, why would a man who's preparing to defect to the competition recommend someone outside his circle for his position? Either to set them up, or to have a puppet in the leadership of his former company through family connections. Luciana leaned back in her chair. Everything began falling into place: her husband's strange behavior after her promotion, her mother-in-law's sudden interest in her career, Daniel's arrival. Are they all in on it? I can't say for certain, but there are too many coincidences. Your husband studied at the same university as Mendoza's nephew. Carmen still calls her former boss regularly. Do you have proof? No hard evidence, but there are oddities. For example, your husband took out a bank loan a week before your promotion. A small one, $50,000. Why, if the family was expecting a salary increase? Maybe he needed the money for something urgent? Maybe. Or maybe he knew he was going to quit his job and took the loan as a safety cushion. Luciana sat in silence, processing what she'd heard. The picture that emerged was terrible, but logical. Why are you telling me this? Because I care about the company. And because you're a good specialist who's been put in a bad position through no fault of your own. What should I do? That's for you to decide. But keep in mind, if the branch keeps losing clients at this rate, it'll be shut down in 3 months. And you'll be left with the reputation of a failed director. Alba stood, leaving money for the coffee on the table. Think carefully. And be careful with your family. Not all relatives have our best interests at heart. Luciana went home in a state of shock. If Martinez's information was true, then she had been betrayed by those closest to her. Her husband, her mother-in-law, even her brother-in-law, all playing their part in a scheme where she was the puppet. The apartment smelled of home cooking. Daniel was making dinner. Carlos was watching TV, a picture of domestic harmony. Only now, Luciana saw it through very different eyes. How was work? Her husband asked as they sat down at the table. Mixed. I learned some interesting information today. What kind? Turns out Victor Mendoza didn't decide to become a farmer on his own. He was asked to leave the company. Carlos choked on his soup. Really? Why? He was poaching clients for the competition. By the way, your mother knows him, apparently. Daniel dropped his spoon. Carlos turned pale. Where did you hear that? From a reliable source. And I also heard you took out a loan a week before my promotion. Is that true? A heavy silence fell. The brothers glanced at each other, unsure of what to say. Carlos, is it true? She repeated. Yes, but it's not what you think. And what exactly do you think I think? Well, that I knew about your appointment in advance. And you didn't? Carlos stood up from the table and paced the kitchen. Mom did mention that Victor Mendoza had hinted at a possible change in leadership. But I didn't think it had anything to do with you. Didn't think or didn't want to think? Lucy, you're making up stories. What conspiracies? Then explain the oddities. Why were you so nervous when I told you about my appointment? Why did Daniel show up right after? Why did your mother suddenly take such an interest in my career? Daniel got up and headed toward the kitchen door. I'm going for a walk, the atmosphere's too heavy. Stay, Luciana stopped him. You're part of this conversation too. Tell me, when did you find out about my appointment? Well, Carlos called me. When exactly? The day you were appointed. What time? Daniel hesitated. I don't remember exactly. Morning or evening? Morning, I think. But I wasn't appointed until noon. Luciana exploded. I didn't even know myself until 12 o'clock. A dead silence fell. Daniel realized he had slipped. Maybe I'm mixing up the days, he muttered. No, you're not. Carlos called you in the morning several hours before the official announcement, which means he knew in advance. Luciana turned to her husband. He stood with his head down, like a schoolboy caught cheating. Well, are you going to deny it? Carlos let out a heavy sigh. Mom did warn me. Mendoza told her he was recommending you for the director position. Recommending me, a person who's busy defecting to competitors and stealing clients. And you didn't think there was anything suspicious about that? I thought it was luck. Whose luck? Mine or yours? Carlos said nothing. The answer was obvious. Luciana rose from the table. So it was all planned. I was set up to take a failing branch, and you decided to take advantage. Daniel just happened to lose his job. Your mother just happened to decide to move to the capital. That's not true, Carlos protested. We just wanted to help family. Help at my expense. You see me as a source of income, not a wife or a relative. You're exaggerating. Am I? Then why did you take out that loan? If you were expecting my salary to go up? As a precaution. Precaution for what? Losing your job? Carlos's shoulders sagged. Mom said there might be difficulties, that it would be tough for the new director. I wanted to be prepared. So you knew from the start that I was being given a sinking ship and you didn't warn me? I hoped it would work out. Hoped? Or planned that I'd support your whole family while you all pretended to look for work. Luciana felt a wave of fury and disappointment rising inside her. The people she trusted had turned out to be calculating manipulators. You know what? She said. I need to be alone. To think this through. She left for the bedroom and locked the door. Through the wall she could hear muffled voices, the brothers talking. No doubt figuring out how to wriggle out of this mess. Luciana sat at her computer and opened her email. Among the work messages was one from an unfamiliar address. Subject, information about your husband. Inside were several photographs. In them, Carlos was sitting in a cafe with an older man. Luciana instantly recognized Victor Mendoza. The photos were dated last week. Attached was a note. Your husband has met with the former director 3 times in the last month. I thought you should know. So even after all the revelations, Carlos had continued to meet with Mendoza and had hidden it from her. Luciana shut the laptop and lay on the bed. The life she had built over the last 3 years was crumbling before her eyes. Her husband was a traitor, his family a pack of parasites, and her job a preloaded failure. But she wasn't going to give up. If they thought they could make her a puppet, they were wrong. Luciana Garcia was not the kind of woman to be manipulated. Tomorrow, the game would change and she would be the one playing it. The next morning, Luciana woke with a clear purpose to get to the bottom of everything. Carlos was still asleep when she dressed quietly and left for work early. She needed to analyze the documents on departing clients and assess the damage. At the office, she called in the chief accountant first thing. Elena, show me the detailed client statistics for the last 3 months. Of course, but brace yourself for unpleasant numbers. The report was even worse than she had imagined. The client exodus had begun a month before Mendoza's departure, and it was systematic. The ones leaving were precisely the most profitable accounts, long-term partners of the branch. Well, this is interesting, Luciana murmured, studying the dates. All the contract terminations were processed almost simultaneously a week before the new director was appointed. Yes, I noticed that too, as if someone warned them in advance about the leadership change, or convinced them that under the new director, it wouldn't be worth doing business. Luciana took out her phone and dialed the number of one of the departed clients, Andres Morales, with whom she had personally worked back when she was still a manager. Andres, good afternoon. This is Luciana Garcia. Oh, Luciana. Congratulations on your promotion. I heard you're the director now. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify about the termination of our contract. Maybe we could find a compromise? I'm afraid the decision is final. You see, Victor Mendoza warned us that with a change in management there might be problems with quality and deadlines. We can't take that risk. He warned you? When? Well, a couple of weeks before he left. Said the company was in crisis, that the new management would be inexperienced. Basically, he advised us to start looking for alternatives. I see. Thank you for your honesty. Luciana hung up, feeling anger rise inside her. Mendoza had been systematically destroying the branch's reputation, laying the groundwork for the new director's failure, and her family had been aware of it all along. She went home during her lunch break, determined to have a serious talk with her husband, but the apartment greeted her with unexpected commotion. Suitcases stood in the hallway, and unfamiliar voices drifted from the kitchen. Lucy, dear, came Carmen's cheerful voice. Here I am. Her mother-in-law appeared in the kitchen doorway holding a pot. Behind her shuffled a short man of about 35 with thinning hair. And this is my eldest son, Pablo, Carmen introduced him. Carlos's brother. He's decided to move to the capital too to build a career. Luciana froze. She had seen Pablo only a couple of times at family gatherings. He worked as a foreman at a factory in the provinces, was married, and had a child. And now suddenly the capital and a new career. Hello, she murmured. And where's your family? My wife and son stayed there for now, Pablo replied awkwardly. I'll settle in first, find a job, then bring them over. I see. And where will you be living? Well, here for now, if you don't mind. Just for a short while, of course. Luciana walked into the living room. Daniel was sitting on the couch with his laptop, while Carlos was explaining something to him about work. When he saw his wife, Carlos stood with a guilty expression. Sunshine, this just sort of happened. Mom and Pablo came. I can see that. How many will there be now? What do you mean? How many of your relatives plan to live here? Well, it's temporary. Carlos, we have a 3-room apartment. Daniel's in the living room, now your mother and brother. Where exactly will they be staying? Mom can take our bedroom. We can sleep on the sofa bed. Pablo and Daniel can be in the living room. So we're supposed to sleep on the couch in our own apartment so your relatives can be comfortable? Only until they get settled. From the kitchen came Carmen's voice. Lucy, come here. I made soup your favorite. Luciana walked into the kitchen. Her mother-in-law bustled at the stove. Jars of homemade preserves were lined up on the table. Carmen, how long are you staying? Oh, I told you I'm moving to the capital for good. It's boring in the suburbs, and life's buzzing here. And the boys need help. Daniel, Pablo. They need jobs and to get established. Through me, I suppose. Well, who else is going to help? You're the director now, you've got connections, opportunities. Luciana sat down at the table, feeling the situation spiral completely out of her control. And what does Pablo know how to do? He's a jack of all trades. Knows electrical work, plumbing, handy with his hands. In a textile company, electricians aren't exactly in high demand. Well, we'll think of something. He could work as a security guard or a loader. The main thing is official employment, with benefits. Luciana realized her mother-in-law saw her company as a job placement agency for family members. Carmen, I can't hire all your sons. There are procedures, requirements. Oh, nonsense. Her mother-in-law waved her hand. A director can do anything. The main thing is to want to help family. That evening, when everyone gathered for dinner, Luciana felt like a stranger in her own home. Carmen was giving orders in the kitchen, the brothers were discussing job prospects, and Carlos nodded along to whatever his mother said. And you could rent out your apartment, Carmen was telling Pablo. Extra income for the family. Right, Lucy? It's not my apartment, Luciana objected. It's Pablo's. But he's going to live here now. Why keep an empty place? What if he wants to go back? Why would he? The capital has so many more opportunities. After dinner, Luciana tried to speak with her husband alone, but he kept finding excuses to avoid a serious conversation. Carlos, I need to talk to you. Of course, but let me help Mom make up the bed first. Carlos, this is important. And so is this. She's a guest. A guest? She's moved in to live here. Well, maybe she should. At her age, living alone is hard. At my expense? At our expense. We're family. The next day, Luciana left for work with a heavy heart. At home, chaos reigned. Her husband's relatives had completely settled in as if they owned the place. At the office, more bad news awaited. Another major client had decided to terminate their contract, and a fabric supplier was delaying shipment due to payment issues. Elena Rodriguez, what's our situation with working capital? Bad. With this kind of client exodus, we could have trouble making payroll by the end of the month. And if we find new clients? It'll take time. 3 or 4 months for negotiations and contracts. Which we don't have. Unfortunately, no. Luciana understood that Mendoza had planned everything perfectly. The branch was doomed to closure, and she would be left with the reputation of a failure. She came home late that evening, hoping the relatives would already be asleep. But the lights were on, and the sound of the TV drifted from the living room. In the kitchen, all 4 of them, Carlos, Carmen, Daniel, and Pablo, sat around the table. Papers lay in front of them. What are you discussing? Luciana asked. Oh, just making plans, Carlos replied. Figuring out the best way for everyone to get settled. Settled where? Well, at work. Mom suggested applying for a few positions at your company. There are no suitable openings at my company. What do you mean there aren't? Carmen said in surprise. Any company needs good workers. Good and qualified workers. My sons aren't qualified. They don't have experience in the textile industry. Experience can be gained. The main thing is the desire to work. Luciana looked at Daniel and Pablo. Both avoided her gaze. And what is it you two actually want? We're ready to take any job, Daniel replied. The main thing is that the salary's decent. And a benefits package, Pablo added. Sick leave, paid vacation. And bonuses, Carmen put in. Serious companies always have bonuses. Luciana realized they had already mentally divided up her company between them. All that remained was to get the director's approval. You know what, let's talk about this tomorrow. I'm tired right now. Of course, dear, her mother-in-law agreed. Rest. We'll stay here a while longer and discuss plans. In the bedroom, Luciana found that half her wardrobe had been cleared for Carmen's clothes. Her dressing table was covered with unfamiliar creams and medicines. Carlos, what is this? Mom put her things here. Just temporarily, until she settles in. In my wardrobe? Well, there's plenty of space, you can share. And where am I supposed to keep my things? Move them to another room. What other room? All your relatives are in them. Lucy, why are you so tense? Just be patient a little longer. How long is the little longer? Until they get jobs. And if they don't? They will. You'll help them. That pressure again. Luciana lay down on the bed, feeling like a prisoner in her own home. In the morning, she woke to the sound of a drill. In the hallway, Pablo was drilling into the wall to install a shelf. What are you doing? Putting up a shoe rack. Your entryway's a mess. Who gave you permission to drill into the walls? Carmen said it was time to tidy up. Luciana went to the kitchen. Carmen was cooking porridge, Daniel scrolling through job listings online. Good morning, Carmen said. Want some porridge? No, thanks. I don't eat breakfast at home. That's a mistake. Breakfast is the foundation of the day. My boys always have a hearty breakfast. Luciana poured herself coffee and sat at the table. Carmen, are you seriously planning to live here? What's wrong with that? The apartment's big, there's room for everyone. This is a rental apartment. The landlord might not approve. Why should he know? The rent's paid on time. But the lease specifies a certain number of residents. Nonsense. We're family, not strangers. Luciana understood there was no point in arguing. Carmen had completely decided she had the right to manage someone else's home. Things at work were getting worse. 2 more clients notified them they were terminating contracts. The branch's turnover had already dropped by 70%. Elena Rodriguez brought her a grim forecast. At this rate, in a month we won't be able to cover our fixed costs: office rent, salaries, utilities. What if we cut staff? We can, but it won't solve the problem fundamentally. We need new clients, which we can't find in a month. I'm afraid not. Luciana knew the branch was doomed. Mendoza had achieved his goal. All that was left was to wait for the head office's decision to shut it down. That evening at home, another family council awaited her. This time, they were discussing specific job openings. I checked your website, Daniel said. You have a sales manager position. That's a demanding role. It requires experience. I learn fast, and I'm good with people. Being personable isn't enough. You need to know the product, the market, the technology. But I learn on the go. And I have a technical education, Pablo cut in. I could work in the production department. We don't have a production department. We're a trading company. Well, then in the warehouse. Or as a delivery driver. Our drivers use their own vehicles. I'll buy a car. Carlos will help. Luciana looked at her husband. You'll help him buy a car? Well, if it's needed for work. With what money? We'll take a loan. We'll take out a loan so your brother can get a job with us. What's wrong with that? It's an investment in the family business. What family business? This isn't our company. But you're the director. That means you can make decisions. Carmen decided to intervene. Lucy, dear, I don't understand why you're resisting so much. My boys want to work, not laze around. That's a good thing. It's good if they're qualified specialists. Qualifications can be gained. The main thing is personal qualities. In business, the main thing is results. And there will be results. My sons are hardworking and responsible. Luciana stood up from the table. You know what? I'll think about it. Of course, think about it, Carlos agreed. Just don't take too long. They need to make plans. That night, Luciana barely slept. Carlos was snoring beside her, Carmen was snoring in the next room, and from the living room came the brothers' voices as they talked late into the night. In the morning over breakfast, the conversation turned to employment again. We've been thinking, Daniel began, maybe we shouldn't wait for official openings. You could create new positions. What positions? Well, assistant to the director, development consultant, project coordinator. Those are all made-up roles. Why made up? We'd actually work. Doing what, exactly? Helping you. Taking some of the load off. Luciana realized they wanted cushy jobs in the company with good salaries and little responsibility. And how much are you planning to earn? Well, no less than the market average, Pablo answered. About 80,000. Each? What, is that too little? Carmen said, offended. My sons deserve a good salary. For what? For work. What work? The work you'll give them. The logic was airtight. First invent the positions, then set the salary, and only afterward decide what those people would actually do. I'm off to work, Luciana said, rising from the table. Think about our proposals, Carlos asked. I'll definitely think about it. At the office, news awaited her. The head office had scheduled an audit of the branch. The auditors were to arrive in a week. Is that bad? Asked Elena Rodriguez. Very bad. They'll see the real situation and decide to shut us down. And what can we do? Nothing. Except somehow miraculously find new clients worth millions. Impossible in a week. Exactly. Luciana knew time was almost up. Another week, and her career as a director would end in complete failure. That evening at home, she found the family deep in planning. On the table were printouts describing job positions. We've worked out some employment options, Carlos announced. Daniel can be appointed development assistant to the director, Pablo as logistics coordinator. And Mom? Luciana asked. I'll be a consultant, Carmen replied. On personnel matters. I have lots of experience. What kind of experience? 30 years working in various organizations. As a secretary. Being a secretary isn't HR work. It's HR work too. Luciana sat down in an armchair, feeling surrounded on all sides. Guys, do you understand that my branch is on the verge of closing? What do you mean, closing? Daniel asked in alarm. It means the branch might be shut down because of losses. But you're the director. You can do something. Like what? Well, I don't know. Find new clients, make a deal with management. Find clients worth tens of millions in a week? That's fantasy. What if we help? Pablo suggested. The whole family can work on finding clients. You have no sales experience. We can learn. The main thing is the desire. Desire isn't enough. You need contacts, a reputation, knowledge of the market. Maybe you should talk to that. What's his name? Mendoza? Carmen suggested. Maybe he can help bring the clients back. Mom, he's the one who stole them. So what? Maybe you can negotiate, split them somehow? Luciana realized they had no grasp of reality. To them, business was some kind of game where all problems could be solved through talks and good intentions. Listen, let's be honest, she said. You're not interested in helping me, you're interested in getting jobs at my expense. And not in order to work, but to get a salary. That's unfair. Carlos protested. We're ready to work. Doing what exactly? Whatever you tell us. And if I tell you to mop floors? Well, that's not according to our qualifications. What qualifications? Daniel has a technical college diploma, Pablo has a vocational certificate. But they have a higher education in life, Carmen interjected. That's not enough for a serious company. I think it is, Carmen insisted. Education isn't everything. The main thing is personal qualities. Luciana stood up. You know what? I'm tired of these conversations. The decision is mine, and I'll make it myself. Of course, Carlos agreed. Just remember we're family, and family should support each other. That phrase was the last straw. Luciana realized the pressure would never stop until she gave in. Family, you say? She repeated. And when I needed support getting a job, where was this family? When I was putting myself through university with my own money, where was family? That's different. How is it different? Back then I was a nobody, and now that I'm a director, suddenly everyone remembers family ties. You're being unfair. I'm being fair. And you know what? Enough games. Tomorrow I'm going to a lawyer to find out how to terminate the rental agreement due to violation of occupancy terms. Silence fell. Carmen went pale. You mean you want to throw us out? I want my life back. But we're family. Daniel cried. Family is mutual support, not one-sided exploitation. Carlos stood and came over to his wife. Lucy, you're wrong. We really are family. And if you have opportunities now, you should share them. Should? Who says I should? Me. I'm your husband. Then you owe me too support, understanding, and protection from your relatives. And I don't support you. You enable their greed. All right, enough. Carmen cut in. Carlos, tell her the truth. Stop tiptoeing around. Carlos looked at his mother, then at his wife. There was resolve in his eyes. Fine. Since you're the company director now, you'll provide for all of us, he said sharply. I'm quitting my job tomorrow. I'll take care of the family and the household. And Mom and my brothers will move in with us at your expense. Period. Luciana stared at her husband, unable to believe her ears. He had spoken the exact words she'd secretly expected, but had hoped never to hear. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the bewildered faces of her new tenants. Carlos, Carmen, Daniel, and Pablo sat on the couch in their pajamas, glancing around with undisguised horror. The thing was, Luciana really hadn't argued the night before. She had simply nodded, wished everyone good night, and gone to the bedroom. And early that morning, while the whole happy crowd was still sleeping, she had taken the keys from their wallets, purses, and pockets, carefully removed all the cash, and arranged it in neat stacks on the coffee table. Carmen was the first to wake. Stepping into the kitchen for her morning coffee, she found Luciana calmly sitting at the table with a notebook and calculator. Good morning, Luciana greeted her evenly. Sleep well? Her mother-in-law muttered something in reply and headed toward the stove. But then her attention was caught by the coffee table in the living room, where neat stacks of bills of various denominations were laid out. Lucy, what's this? Money? Where did it come from? From your wallets, Luciana said calmly. Carmen ran to wake her sons. 5 minutes later, the whole clan was crowded into the living room, staring at the contents of the table. Did you rob us? Daniel demanded indignantly. I collected payment for lodging, Luciana replied, not looking up from her notebook. 2,000 pesos a day per person. What? Pablo howled. 2,000 for what? The market rate for renting a room in a good district of the capital, plus utilities, cleaning, meals. Carlos walked over to the table and counted the money. There's about 60,000 here. Yes, roughly. Daniel had 22,000, Pablo 18, Carmen 19, and you 9. Your total debt as of today is 56,000 pesos. 56 for what? Carmen screeched. For accommodation. Daniel's been here 2 weeks 14 days. At 2,000 per day, that's 28,000. Carmen and Pablo have been here a week 14,000 each. That's 56,000 total. I took 68 with meals and additional services included. Luciana stood and walked to the window. Of course, I could have charged more. In elite neighborhoods, they ask 3,000 a day. But I gave you a family discount. You've lost your mind. Carlos shouted. This is robbery. This is business. You said I should support you all? Fine. But every service has a cost. Living in a capital apartment is no exception. But we're family. Carmen tried to appeal to her conscience. Family doesn't mean free, especially when it's about able-bodied adults who refuse to work. Daniel paced the room, searching for an argument. But we were planning to get jobs through you. You were planning. And I'm planning to live at your expense. A fair trade. Return the money immediately, Pablo demanded. No, that's payment for services. If you don't like the terms, you know where the door is. Luciana returned to the table and opened her notebook. By the way, starting today the rate is going up. Since Carlos has quit his job and will also be living at my expense, the fee is now 3,000 pesos a day per person. That's 12,000 a day for the 4 of you. This is outrageous. Carmen shrieked. These are market prices. If you want cheaper, find a hostel for 500 pesos a night. But we don't have that kind of money. Then here's your alternative: move out by tonight. All 4 of you. Daniel goes back to the provinces to your parents, Pablo to his wife and child, and Carmen to her apartment in the suburbs, the one you were planning to rent out. And what about our plans? Our jobs in the capital? Daniel asked plaintively. What jobs? In 2 weeks you haven't even put together a decent resume. All your plans came down to me placing you in cushy positions with good salaries. Carlos tried to take control of the situation. Luciana, let's talk calmly. We're adults. Perfect. I'm all ears. It's wrong to take money from family. And it's right to live at someone else's expense. We weren't living at someone else's expense. We were planning to work. Planning. For 2 years. On my back. Drawing salaries for imaginary jobs and made-up positions. You're exaggerating. I'm a realist, and as a company director, I know exactly the difference between real work and a performance of work. Luciana walked over to the cabinet and took out a folder of documents. By the way, since we're talking about work, yesterday I got a call from the head office. The audit's been moved up to tomorrow. And you know what's interesting? I've managed to find documents proving Mendoza's connection to our family. Carmen turned pale. What connection? Correspondence between you and him. Your messages where you informed him of my appointment a day before the official announcement. Photos of Carlos meeting Mendoza in cafes. Where did you get that? I have contacts in various places, and none of them like seeing honest people set up. Carlos sank into a chair. What are you going to do? To hand over all the materials to the auditors. Let them figure out who organized the sabotage of the branch's operations. But it's not just us who'll suffer, you will too. I've already suffered. I was appointed to a knowingly doomed position to be the scapegoat. Now let the ones who set it up take the fall. And what will happen to us? Nothing for me. I have an alibi in the form of documents proving I was deceived. But for you, involvement in a conspiracy against the company is a serious charge. Luciana sat down at the table and picked up a pen. Still, you have a choice. Option 1, you move out today, go back to your normal lives, and I don't hand the documents over to the auditors. Option 2, you stay here, pay 15,000 a day, and tomorrow you find out you're suspected of economic crimes. That's blackmail. It's an offer, a fair one, given the circumstances. The family glanced at each other, unsure what to do. Luciana calmly kept writing in her notebook. By the way, I have more news. This morning I met with a lawyer. Turns out, you can dissolve a marriage unilaterally if one spouse abuses the other's trust for personal gain. You want a divorce? Carlos whispered. I've already filed the papers. In a month, I'll be free. But why? Luciana set down the pen and looked at her husband. Because you betrayed me. You took part in a plot against my career and planned to use me as a source of income for your family. You're not my husband, you're an accomplice to fraud. I love you. You love my paycheck. Big difference. Carmen tried one last argument. Lucy, what are you doing? We're not enemies. We just wanted to live better. At my expense. Without working. Parasiting off someone else's labor. What's so wrong about that? You can afford it. I can. But I don't want to. You know the difference between a successful person and a failure? A successful person earns for themselves. A failure looks for someone to feed off. Luciana stood and walked to the window. You have 1 hour to pack. Then I'll call a taxi to the station and buy tickets to the province and the suburbs. My treat is one last gesture of goodwill. And if we refuse? Daniel asked. Then I'll call the police and report unlawful entry into the apartment. I have a lease agreement stating that only I have the right to reside here. Everyone else can be classified as unauthorized occupants. But Carlos is your husband. For now. But he's not listed in the lease. Which means he's a violator too. Silence fell. The family realized they were trapped. Luciana had thought through every scenario. All right, Carlos said at last. We'll go. But this isn't right. What's right is what's fair. And fair is when everyone lives on their own money and doesn't rely on someone else's work. What about love? Family? Love is proven by actions, not words. And your actions showed you betray your wife for an easy life. Carlos headed to the bedroom to pack. The others followed. Luciana stayed in the living room, continuing her notes. An hour later, a taxi was parked outside. 4 people with suitcases and bags loaded into the car. Carmen was crying, the brothers were sullen, and Carlos kept trying to explain something to her until the last moment. Luciana, you'll regret this. I doubt it. We've been together 3 years. For 3 years I lived with someone who turned out to be a stranger. I can change. Too late. Trust doesn't grow back. The taxi drove off. Luciana went back up to the apartment and looked around. For the first time in weeks, it was quiet. No one bossing her around in the kitchen, no one discussing job prospects, no one demanding her attention or money. She walked through the rooms, clearing away the traces of her unwelcome guests, removing their things from the closet, folding up the bedding in the living room, throwing out the groceries Carmen had bought. By evening, the apartment was hers again. Luciana cooked herself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window. The city glittered with lights, life went on. Around 9, the phone rang. It was Carlos. Hello, Lucy, we've arrived. I want you to know this isn't the end. For me, it is. I'll find a job, prove I can be a reliable husband. Carlos, you took part in a plot against me. That's unforgivable. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, and you got what you deserved. She hung up and turned off the sound. There would be no more of these conversations. The next day, the auditors did arrive at the office. Luciana told them honestly about the situation with the clients, showed the documents on the loss of orders, and explained how it was tied to Mendoza's departure. We have grounds to believe the previous director systematically prepared a move to the competition, she said, and my appointment was part of that plan. What proof do you have? Timing coincidences, client testimony, documents linking Mendoza to members of my family. The auditors reviewed the evidence and concluded that the new director had indeed been the victim of a conspiracy. In their final report, they recommended investigating Mendoza's activities and not holding Luciana responsible. What's more, the head office offered her leadership of a new project to rebuild the branch's client base with expanded authority and a higher salary. We value honesty, said the CEO, and we're ready to support employees who aren't afraid to speak the truth. Luciana accepted the offer. She now had a chance not only to clear her name but also to build her career on a new level. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Carlos tried to contest the decision, but Luciana's lawyer presented the court with documents proving his participation in a plot against his wife's interests. The case was closed in her favor. Another month later, the branch began to recover. Luciana found new clients, restored relationships with suppliers, and reorganized work processes. Revenue began to grow. At the same time, she exchanged her rented apartment for her own, buying a 2-bedroom in a good neighborhood. No one could ever again lay claim to her living space under the pretext of family ties. Sometimes, former relatives would call. Carmen complained about hardships, Daniel asked for help finding a job, and Pablo hinted at financial problems. Luciana politely refused them all. Carlos tried to meet with her several times, insisting that he had changed, that he had realized his mistakes, that he was ready to start over. But Luciana knew people don't change. Someone who betrayed you once will betray you again. You know, she told him during their last meeting, "I'm grateful to you for this lesson. You showed me that success attracts not only friends but also parasites. Now I know how to tell them apart. I'm not a parasite. You're someone willing to live off another person instead of earning your own way. What do you call that?" Carlos had no answer. A year passed. Luciana was promoted to regional director, moved to a more prestigious neighborhood, and bought a car. Under her leadership, the branch became one of the most profitable in the company. Her personal life also flourished. She was dating a colleague from the head office, a successful, self-sufficient man who never saw her as a financial resource for his relatives. "Don't you miss family life?" her friend Natalia asked. "The real kind of family life, yes. Supporting freeloaders, no." And what if Carlos really has changed? Nada, there are things you don't forgive. Betrayal is one of them. But you were happy together for 3 years. I thought I was happy. In reality, I was with a man who played the role of a loving husband while waiting for the moment he could take advantage of me. Luciana looked out the window of her new office on the 18th floor. The city stretched below, full of opportunities and possibilities. "You know the main lesson I took from all this?" she said. "A successful woman shouldn't share her success with those who haven't earned it, because there will be no gratitude, only new demands. That's harsh. It's honest and fair." Luciana was alone, but she was free, successful, and happy, and that was worth any loss.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.